How many times must I forgive? 7 times? 7? 77 times. Forgiveness is the most identifiable characteristic of the Christian. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Blessed are the merciful. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. The story of the prodigal son. The story of Simon Peter after he denied the Lord 3 times. Forgiveness is the most identifiable characteristic of the Christian. Almost exactly 2 years ago, in fact, it was on September 6, 1918, 26-year-old Botham Jean, an African-American accountant, was sitting in his apartment on the sofa, eating ice cream and watching television, when an off-duty policewoman, Amber Geiger, came in. She thought she was in her apartment, and she just shot and killed him, eating ice cream and watching TV. A year later, a little bit more than a year later, October the 6th, 2019, Amber Geiger was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 10 years. So in the courtroom, after the sentence had been given, and Amber's family left, and most of the rest of the people in the courtroom left, family members of Botham Jean were invited to come up and speak to the defendant. And so Brant Jean, Botham's younger brother, 18 years old, got into this seat facing Amber Geiger, who senselessly killed his brother. And he didn't believe anything else was going on. He didn't believe he was being videotaped at all. But he just spoke from the heart. And in part, this is what he said. Speaking for myself, I forgive you. And I know if you go to God and ask him, he will forgive you. He also said, I love you just like anyone else, and I am not going to hope you rot and die. I personally want the best for you. I think giving your life to Christ is the best thing my brother Botham would want for you. And then he did something equally surprising. He asked the judge, he said, I don't know if this is possible, but Your Honor, could I give her a hug? The judge didn't answer right away. And then he said, please? And the judge agreed. And he came down from that witness chair, and Amber came up to him, and she melted in his arms, sobbing. Later he would say, that he wanted to hug her. This was my gesture, my decision of letting her know that I truly forgive her. In an interview on Good Morning America, subsequent to that, Brant Jean said, "If you are trying to forgive, understand that she is a human being. She still deserves love. I know that every time I ask God for forgiveness, He forgives me. So who am I not to forgive someone who asks? This is what you have to do to set yourself free." And he continued, "I didn't really plan on living the rest of my life hating this woman. I know that there's something called peace of mind, and that's the type of stuff you need to do to have peace of mind. That's why I wake up happy in the morning." One great act of forgiveness. Perhaps we don't have occasion, we are not necessarily called to that one great act of such forgiveness. But maybe just as difficult, we might find it very difficult to forgive someone close to us, like a member of the family or coworkers or neighbors, etc., who offend us over and over and over again. We have the saying, 3 strikes and you're out. Peter's saying, 7 strikes and you're out? Not even 77 times. We can't get around the Christian mandate to forgive. But we should understand that there are different kinds of situations which we may respond to differently, and different levels of forgiveness. Many years ago, someone I knew never seemed to miss an opportunity to demean me and my friends. He was constantly putting us down and doing very hurtful things to people I cared about. This brought about in me something that I had never experienced before: resentment. Now, I've been angry, but I'd get over it in a day or two. But resentment is something that lingers and that eats away at us. This was the bitter fruit of not being able to forgive over and over and over again. I prayed, I went to confession, I begged God's mercy, I thought I had forgiven, and then something else would happen, and that resentment would reignite. But what was most scary to me, I was afraid that this resentment would settle in my soul and permanently embitter me. I decided it was better for me to remove myself from the situation, at least temporarily, so that I could get the upper hand on this spiritual struggle. I didn't want to become like some who constantly relive a vicious, angry cycle and feed off the negative energy of resentment, which evokes from within one more hurt or hostility after another, intensifying my anger and justifying my resentment. Fortunately, temporarily separated from the source of the offenses, I was able to heal and recalibrate my spiritual center. Now, there are different kinds of situations that might require forgiveness. One might be an abusive situation. That may require us to get away from the situation, not to put ourselves in that path, to separate ourselves or to avoid the person who's causing that abuse. So it does not mean that we're not forgiving. It just means that we obviously need to protect ourselves. And Jesus isn't speaking about that here. There's another type of situation, and maybe this is more common. It's the typical kinds of offenses that people do against one another out of ignorance, out of jealousy, maybe spite, maybe it's annoyances. That we have to deal with in a better way than simply holding anger and lack of forgiveness for the offender. So that brings us to two types of forgiveness. And we just heard someone, Dr. Everett Worthington, tell us this, and I think he's very much versed in the art of forgiveness. And he describes decisional forgiveness, which Jesus is commanding us in today's gospel. Decisional forgiveness. It's a decision about how we intend to act toward the person from this point forward. I'll say that again. A decision about how we intend to act toward the person from this point forward. We may not like the person. We're not required to like the person. We may not trust the person. We're not required to trust the person. But regardless of the offenses, Jesus says that we are to treat the offender with compassion and to let go of the inclination to passive-aggressive punishment, which is so common among us. So we make the decision to forgive, and we choose to act out of that decision, even if we don't feel it inside. We choose to act with compassion toward the other, toward the offender. That's the kind of forgiveness that Jesus commands us in today's gospel. But there's another kind of forgiveness, a deeper kind. It's emotional forgiveness. There are very painful emotions that may be associated with the offense against us. Very, very painful emotions. We can't just wish them away. That's different. I don't believe God expects us to just automatically say, I'm just thrilled about being in this person's company. But Dr. Worthington says that that's like a corrosive acid within us that eats away at us, the lack of emotional forgiveness. But he says that we can dilute the acid over time, dilute the corrosive nature of that lack of emotional forgiveness. So if we look at the other person with empathy, for example, try to understand where that person is coming from, what brought that person to the place where he or she is, that she's so or he is so hurtful. The empathy, filling our hearts with empathy, can dilute that corrosive, acidic, painful emotion, maybe to the point where it's no longer destructive within us. And it really can set us free. I believe that Brant Jean was capable of not only decisional forgiveness, but emotional forgiveness. And he evidently was free from that burden. And that freedom from the emotional burden makes us healthy, peaceful. So it's something that we really should aspire to, even if we can't expect to do it overnight. It's something that we must aspire to if we want to be truly free from that which binds us and holds us captive. I just want to say two brief things about others that we should forgive, that we must forgive. One, some people need to forgive God. Sometimes, if God doesn't answer our prayers the way we want him to, we may get angry with God. We may expect God to keep us free from any pain or suffering. But God, I prayed. Why am I still suffering? Why do I still experience this? God never promised to keep us from suffering. In fact, he said the opposite, didn't he? If you follow me, you will follow me to the cross. But what he did promise, he promised to be with us through our trials. But even if we thought we were justified in being angry with God, haven't we experienced God's constant forgiveness? When people come to confession over many years, it's very obvious. Anybody who's a confessor, people will say the same thing pretty much. More than 70 times 7. But each time, the priest in God's name says, I absolve you of your sins. And the last person that we need to forgive is ourselves. Many of us hold ourselves hostage to our feelings of guilt or shame or embarrassment. But that's living in the past. There's nothing we can do living in the past. That's where the devil holds us captive if we live in the past. God frees us. God forgives us. We must forgive ourselves. So I just want to conclude by reminding us of Brant Jean's spiritual wisdom. Forgiveness is what you have to do to set yourself free. I know that there is something called peace of mind, and that's the type of stuff you need to do to have peace of mind. We who follow Christ have really no option. We have to start by deciding to forgive, to acting appropriately toward the offender, and working toward a deeper emotional release of the negative things that hold us bound. Lord, how many times must we forgive? 7 times? No, not 7 times. 70 times 7.